I can't stand it when she responds to my questions with questions. She does it every single time without even thinking. It doesn't matter what the question is or what her answer could be. She always replies with a question. She does this for everything. Megan, what's for dinner? Does it look like I cooked? Megan, where do you want the chair moved to? Harold, where did I say I wanted it? Megan, you look hot in that teddy. How about we mess up the sheets? What, don't I also look hot in my flannel PJs too? Regardless of the topic, my questions are always met with questions. The only time she couldn't respond with a question was the last question I ever asked her. What was the question? Just 6 simple words with a question mark, but the hardest one to answer. Why would I want to stay? That's the one question she couldn't answer. The sad part was, I knew she couldn't answer it. Cheaters never can. They can give you the usual nonsense, but when it comes down to it, they know the answer. It's just a matter of getting them to face the truth. From the beginning, I should have known it would end this way. My marriage was doomed from the start. I should have listened to my dad and followed the rules. My father taught me 10 principles to live by. 1. Life is enjoyable until you mess it up. 2. Work only feels difficult when you don't want to do it. 3. To see what your wife will look like in 20 years, look at her mother. 4. It takes a strong woman to avoid becoming like her mother. 5. Friends are plentiful, but true bros are lifelong. 6. Never give your wife all the money. 7. No affair is worth losing half your assets, no matter what the judge says. 8. Looks fade, but true beauty lasts forever. 9. If it looks, walks, and sounds like a duck, it's a duck. 10. No woman is worth dying or going to jail for, so always plan carefully for revenge and leave no evidence. My dad always said that if Mom disappeared and left her purse behind, it meant one of 2 things. She ran away, or he chased her away. If he chased her away, her purse stayed because he wasn't giving her anything. My dad made sure my mom heard him loud and clear. Son, she'll leave with what she brought into this marriage and nothing more. I always wondered what made a man so hateful, a lesson I would understand later in life. I'm not keen on sharing my life story, so I won't. But here's a summary. I was born in North Texas to a good family, and my dad disciplined me daily, sometimes justly, sometimes not. My mom was the backbone of our family. My sisters Kelly and Ann were always there for me and my younger brother Carlton. Carlton is a bit of a nerd, but overall he's a good brother. And then there's Megan. I met Megan in 8th grade. She was charming, and for me, it was love at first sight. We only started dating in our sophomore year of college. From that moment on, she became my girlfriend. For those who are wondering why it took us so long to become a couple, you can ask her father. Her father looked like the old Screamer, the dog from the classic movie. If any guy got within a foot of his daughter, he barked like a bloodhound. It took him 3 years to let me sit on their porch, and another year to just call her. Even then, it always seemed to me that he was eavesdropping on our phone conversations. Before she could ask if I could take her out, he would shout, "No!" So trust me when I tell you that I was completely shocked when I asked him for permission to marry Megan, and he said, "Yes, son, you can." Son. This man actually called me son. Over the past 6 years, he's called me everything from jerk to dumbass to king of assholes. But now, I'm his son. Go figure it out. For me, family life was fantastic. Our honeymoon was just incredible. I was 22 years old at the time. Life with Megan has never been boring. For the next 15 years, life was tough, but fulfilling. We worked, played, loved, and had children. We had 3 kids, Tommy, Jessica, and Paul, our little angels. For those who don't have children, they have an instinctive radar. Most of the time, I managed to take off her bra and unhook it before there was a knock at the door. It was only when I turned 25 that everything started to fall apart. The only thing keeping me from leaving the country was our children. 2 of the 3 kids were away, and the 3rd was about to leave. Tommy was studying at the University of Florida, Jessica was at the University of California, Knoxville, and Paul had just graduated from high school and was headed to Gainesville to become a Gator. But as a teenager, he just had to have a blast on his last night at home. Paul was acting recklessly and tried to drive home drunk. He crashed into a pole and ended up in the hospital in critical condition. Megan and I rushed to the hospital. His spleen had been removed. He had lung damage and needed a kidney. His kidneys were too damaged, and he needed a donor quickly. The doctor asked if he could do blood work to see if I was a match. Megan gave us a strange look, as if she was trying to figure something out. Then she said, Shit. You don't need to bother. He isn't Paul's father." I backed up and looked at her. I went to grab her, but the doctor stopped me and told me not to do this now. I asked her what the hell she was talking about. The doctor told her she needed to get the father here to save Paul. I turned and walked away. Then I stopped, turned back, dropped my wedding ring on the floor, and walked into the room to see Paul. I couldn't even think about him not being my son at the moment. I just wanted him to get the help he needed. When Megan and the doctor walked into the room, I turned and left. The doctor grabbed my arm and told me that I needed to stay because Paul needed both of us right now, so I stayed. Later that evening, Paul's father came in. About an hour later, my brother Carlton showed up. I was about to tell him what was going on when I noticed that his blood had been taken. Paul's father was Megan's brother-in-law, my brother Carlton. Then he, the doctor, and Megan left the room. I got the answer to my question. Carlton came in, trying to explain what had happened. I left the room. It was too hard for me. When I entered the waiting room, I saw Abby, Carlton's wife, sitting with her head in her hands, crying. I wasn't sure if it was because of Paul or because of what she found out about Carlton and Megan. Either way, both situations were confusing. The doctor came up to me and asked if we could talk for a minute. He told me that I should take the initiative and be close to Paul and Megan. They needed me. I asked him how I was supposed to do it. I said, "You're such a big man. Tell me, how can I be with this woman? She just told me that my son is my nephew. She's been sleeping with my brother for God knows how long, at least 18 years, because Paul is his son. And what should I do with Carlton? I can't call him my brother anymore. What kind of brother sleeps with his brother's wife and leaves him alone to raise his children? But since you're a doctor, maybe you can give me some advice in this regard. Do you have any glasses for the infidels? Perhaps you know a way to erase this woman from my memory." I thought not. So go away and try to cure Paul. You can't help my marriage or my life. The doctor shook his head, turned around, and walked back to Paul's room. I went up to Abby and asked her what Carlton had said to her. She said that all 3 of my children are from him. Carlton said Megan told him I was infertile. This was unfamiliar territory for me, and how could she possibly know? I had only ever been hospitalized once before, and I was just 10 years old at the time. There was something going on, and I was determined to uncover the answers. It wasn't until 11:30 the next morning that the doctor informed us that Paul would be okay. Carlton's kidney was a perfect match. As I made my way towards the exit, Megan and the doctor rushed over to me just as the door was closing. Megan reached out to grab me, but the doctor intervened. I felt the urge to lash out at him. Megan inquired about my destination, reminding me about our son, Paul. The term, "our son," struck me as ironic. Without a word, I turned and walked away. I arrived home around 2:30 that afternoon after a brief stop at Home Depot for a couple of lock sets. I changed the locks on the doors and began packing Megan's belongings. I had 4 bags packed before I received the first phone call. It was her father, wanting to come over and talk before I did something foolish. "Like what?" I retorted. "Come on, Dad, what possible reason would I have to do something foolish?" Before he could respond, I abruptly ended the call. As I packed up Megan's belongings, my thoughts drifted back to Paul and everything that had transpired. It brought me back to all those lengthy discussions in psychology class. Nature versus nurture. Did DNA define Paul as my son? Certainly, in my heart, he was mine. From his earliest moments, his first steps, his first football catch, to his first fight, his first date, his first kiss, didn't all these experiences make him my son? But when he truly needed a father, I wasn't there, was I? When he required blood and a kidney, things I would have readily given, I couldn't. In his hour of need, I could only sit helpless because Megan turned out to be unfaithful. The moment the doctor mentioned a kidney, he ceased to be my son. While my family's lineage would continue, what about my own branch of the family tree? There wouldn't be a Harold Paxton lineage. Meanwhile, Carlton's lineage flourished with 7 offspring, 4 from Abby and 3 from Megan, making him the family's patriarch. I needed to pause my thoughts momentarily, as I was causing myself a headache. I went to the refrigerator, grabbed a beer, and settled into my recliner. Just as I turned on the TV, I heard the sound of cars pulling up outside. Without budging, I stayed seated, sipping my beer, as the knocking on the door commenced. It seemed like there were 4 or 5 people out there. They persisted for about 10 minutes until Megan arrived. I believe it was my father who instructed her to use her key to open the door. I imagine they were quite surprised when her key failed to work. After finishing my beer, I retrieved my pistol from my desk, approached the door, and opened it. I inquired of my father what they wanted, prompting him to question why I was armed. I explained it was for security against intruders. Once again, I asked them their purpose. My father acted as their spokesperson, requesting permission for them to come in and speak with me. I agreed, with the condition that Carlton and Megan weren't among them. Megan remained on the porch in tears, while Carlton seemed intent on proving his masculinity, until he heard the distinctive sound of me cocking my Desert Eagle. I believe that was the moment they realized their expectations were not going to unfold as planned. So, over the next 2 hours, they divulged the information, everyone except Abby and me. I couldn't fathom that these individuals were my relatives. Abby empathized with Megan's emotions. My father, the one who had taught me how to handle a cheating spouse, now advocated for me to accept one. It's curious how becoming a grandparent can muddle your judgment. Son, she did what she felt she had to do to give you the family you desired. You must try to calm down and understand Megan's perspective. I couldn't, and I was on the verge of attempting to. I was done with them all. I'll never comprehend why a woman's desire for a child justifies her seeking intimacy elsewhere to achieve it. Is it any different for a man who wishes to have a child with his wife, only to discover she can't conceive? Oh, I forgot. Apparently only women are permitted to stray under such circumstances. It appears only another woman can truly grasp the anguish of being unable to bear children. I suppose men aren't interested in starting families unless they can witness their child grow in their partner's womb. They don't find fulfillment in caring for their beloved, their lifelong companion, during this journey. I suppose I'm not a man then, because I shouldn't be hurting like this. They bombarded me with all sorts of nonsense about considering the children and preserving family unity. They fed me lines about how a woman feels incomplete without children and how women are inherently emotional and driven to procreate. Then, out of nowhere, they dropped the bombshell. It was a blessing from above. That's when I snapped and kicked them all out. She's a deceitful cheat who had my brother's children. If that's a blessing, then I need to rethink my beliefs. Turns out, my mom had told her about my infertility due to yellow fever when I was 10, but conveniently forgot to inform me. What a mother. About an hour after I showed them the door, the kids arrived. Megan had called them, instructing them to go to her parents' house first, but they came straight home. I spent the next hour laying everything out for them, no holds barred. Jessica was skeptical, so she scheduled a DNA test and planned to confront Megan. Tommy insisted I was still his dad no matter what, but he agreed to Jessica's plan because he needed closure. The following day, we all visited the hospital, first checking on Paul before having our blood drawn. Jessica then went to see Megan, while Tommy and I stayed with Paul for a few hours before returning home. The atmosphere at home was tense over the next few days, needless to say. On the third day, the hospital called with the results. Surprisingly, Jessica was the only one who was biologically mine. This revelation shattered Tommy, who stormed out upon realizing Megan had been unfaithful since the second year of our marriage. It wasn't even 2 years before she conceived Tommy's child after 18 months. I initiated divorce proceedings immediately upon receiving the results, providing my lawyer with the DNA evidence. I didn't seek a 50-50 split. I wanted everything. I believe in equal rights. When a man cheats, the common advice is to take everything. Yet, when a man is cheated on, the response is often dismissive or blaming. Many of my friends distanced themselves from me in the aftermath. I lost not only my parents, but also my in-laws, as they were aware of Megan's infidelity all along. In their final meeting, Megan requested 30 minutes alone. After 25 years of marriage, enduring 23 years and 4 months of deception, though who's keeping track? I couldn't bear to sit through one more falsehood. Even in our last encounter, every statement felt like a query. Harold, haven't I fulfilled my duties as your wife? Harold, reflect on it. Have you missed out on anything? Considering all the love we've shared, do you truly want to give up on us? Seriously, Harold, why would you want to depart? I granted her the 30 minutes, but in the end, I posed a single question she couldn't answer. The query wasn't complex, yet it stumped her, the only one she couldn't respond to. I then spent the next 10 minutes recounting the events of the past 2 years of our marriage. Finally, I asked Megan, why would I choose to remain? With that, I stood and departed. 90 days later, the divorce was finalized. I didn't owe any alimony, child support, or anything else. Megan ended up paying me $350,000 a month in alimony for 5 years. There was no house to sell. I had given it to Jessica. I reside there rent-free. As for our finances, I had no income as I quit my job the day before the DNA results arrived. She had been unfaithful for over 20 years, and I refused to be financially penalized for it. I have no money in savings. It was all used for Paul's medical expenses. Nothing from nothing, as they say. The only positive thing was that Abby informed me that my parents, as well as Megan and Carlton, were planning to trap me so that we could reconcile and become a family again. Abby and I spent the next 3 hours strategizing and enjoying each other. Carlton was stupid because Abby had a gorgeous figure. I won't reveal any further details because I intended to use this to my advantage again. However, by the end of the day, Paul, Tommy, and I were supposed to go on a cruise during their visit. When we returned from the cruise, Jessica informed me that my lawyer was ready to sue Carlton for 23 years of non-payment of child support. We demanded $350,000 for each child, college expenses, cars, and all other expenses, as children are expensive. As soon as the trial was started, Abby filed for divorce. I never officially adopted Paul or Tommy because they didn't want to. They knew that I was their father, not by blood, but because of the love and support I gave them. Paul said he couldn't call me a real cuckold just because his mother had problems. He wasn't like that. Tommy agreed. It's been 10 years, and I'm 62 years old. I have children aged 5 and 10. My wife, Abby, is 52 years old. Yes, I replied to Abby. I'll never admit it, but I like using Carlton's alimony to provide my kids with nice things. And no, I didn't marry Abby out of revenge. It gives me pleasure to flaunt our relationship in front of Carlton. As for Megan, she told Jessica that she would wait endlessly to get me back someday. Even Jessica is amused by this. My parents are constantly trying to convince Jessica and Abby to persuade Harold to visit us. They think our time is running out, and Harold will regret that he won't be here when it happens. As for me, I can't bring myself to regret missing out on the lives of those who betrayed me by claiming to love me. Forgiving them on their deathbed seems incredible, especially considering their advanced ages of 80 and 82, not to mention the fact that they have a Carlton. I have to leave. The kids are staying the night with Jessica and Paul.